So what's going on there, Mike?
I forgot to mention to my mum and dad about sending me some stuff over.
All right. I will be continuing with my piss up by listening to you talking.
I'm on the tea at the moment, so a bit early in the day.
Brian, can you turn your light off? The reflection's quite harsh on the eyes.
Would you kindly mute yourself again, please?
How the mighty have fallen. But welcome everybody. This is my name's Michael from Kendo World. Yulin usually does this, but he's having a day off today, so you've got me. Today we're joined by Paul Budden from the UK. Paul's been practicing Kendo for about 40 years, getting his Shodan in 1982, and then 25 years later his 7th Dan in 2007, and was awarded Kyoshi in 2011. Paul founded the Kodokan Kendo Club UK in 1982, and since 1985 has been bringing over Hanchi Sumi Masatake Sensei for the Kodokan Seminar. Paul's had a very long and varied Kendo history. Was on the organising committee of the 12th World Kendo Championships in Glasgow, and had many other roles within the British Kendo Federation. Participated at many events as competitor and official throughout Europe. Very busy Kendo life. But in addition to that, he's also written several books on the subject of Kendo. The first was out in 1992, looking at a far mountain, a study of Kendo kata. He's also published 3 books with us at Bunkasha International Kendo World. And they are A Truly British Samurai, Oshu Kendo Renmei, and A Man of Many Parts, which I'm sure we'll get to talk about later. His latest book, Paper Butterflies, came out this year. So Paul Budden, please welcome to KED Talks. Great to have you here.
Thanks very much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
So,
not in the flesh.
No, not in the flesh. So are you keeping well back in the UK?
Yeah, it's great. Every day's like Sunday, so it's cool. It's just that if you want to go out anywhere, there's nowhere to go. But anyway, we'll get over it, I'm sure.
Okay. So as I mentioned in your little intro before, apart from your Kendo experience, which has obviously been very long, you've also found a lot of time to be writing some books. So your first one was out in 1992, looking at a far mountain. So what made you decide to take on writing a book back then?
82. I'd been doing Kendo for, a couple of years then, I think, just about. And I was training with Terry Holt Sensei in Mumeshi, and he taught me everything he knew, which was great. But there were some big gaps in the kata, and he couldn't find anybody at that time. And of course, Alex's book wasn't out by that time either. So there was only a book by Michael Finn, which was fairly basic, and a Zenken book, which again was quite basic. So I was just making notes and writing down everything and asking lots of teachers. When I met Sumi Sensei and other teachers, Shiori Sensei, I asked them all questions about kata and wrote it down. And then I met a sensei from Kawasaki, Goro Taki Sensei, who didn't have any grade, but he was very, very high-level teacher. And we got very friendly. And he said to me, why don't you put it in a book, because it might help people. And so that's what we did. We put it together, did a limited run on it of 1,300 copies, and it's quite amazing because now they can go for £1,000.
Have you got hold of a few copies then?
Yeah, the collector's item, not for the content. I mean, it's purely for the limited run, I think, you know. But it was good. But it's kind of interesting when you start to research, and it was all hard research at that time. Obviously, as I say, by personal recollection, there was no internet or anything to whiz into. So it was kind of hard. But it was interesting. I've always been interested in history anyway. When I was at school and when I was at college, I did history. And it was just good fun. And finding out things that people don't know is always a buzz. So it was a bit of a hard slog, that first one. But and then again, I went to sleep for a few years after that. I didn't bother. It was a lot of hard work. But it's interesting because I think you find that you learn more after writing the book. Writing a book can open lots of doors. It can, you get things popping up all the time, you know, especially now, as you know, we do this Facebook group, Friends Who Like Kendo History, which is very easy because it's lots of stuff on the internet you can find. You've got to know where to look. But things pop up all the time, which is great. Yeah.
So roughly how long did it take you to do that book?
Okay, so I started, let's have a look. I started that in 1982, I started formulating. So it took me 10 years to get it out published.
Wow.
But then again, the process was different because everything had to be done on plates. Everything was plate print, so that took in itself about 2 years, I think, to get organized. And it was kind of funny because somebody might remember a guy called Brian Kay. He was from Glasgow. He passed away a few years now, but he ran the Eikoku News Digest in London, Japanese newspaper, and he did all the photographs for me. And he said to me, he said, forget about writing a book. He said, just publish the photographs. He said that they'll sell without any problem. But anyway, we did the book, and that was it. Yeah.
So that came out in 1992, and then you said you had a break for quite a while. That was the next thing you did was the profile in Hugh Cortazzi book of was it the 3 Ages of British Kendo? Was that the next thing?
No, there was I did another techie book, which is kind of was published in a bit of a rush. Was the book on Onaha, Devil's Gloves.
Devil's Gloves and the One Cut, wasn't it? Right.
That one. Yeah. And it's kind of, I'd like to go back on it at some stage and do it because it was put out in a bit of a rush and was not really that happy with it, but it still sells. And it was kind of based on the same format as we've done with Far Mountain, just a few selected forms from the Onaha. But again, that was interesting because the whole process had changed. To actually print a book digitally was a lot easier. But as I say, I think it's still work in progress for me, really, that one.
Right.
When I get a spare 10 years or something, I'll do it.
Yeah, it's amazing that you mentioned about the difference in the technology between then and now. Like a couple of years ago, we put out Hirakawa Sensei's book, and then I went to his house and got given a bag of negatives, of actual celluloid negatives. And I just don't know how on earth. I mean, there's thousands of in the book. In the end, there are 1,300 photos in that book, and then the negatives, the original ones, would have been so many more than that. But then having to go through each one, looking at in a tiny little frame, circling which ones you want, and then a lot of the negatives weren't able to be used. They were so old and scuffed. And so we had to spend several days reshooting everything on digital. That's so much easier now to work with. So I can imagine what
Well, Far Mountain was the same. We had a photographer there, and he took over 3,000 stills, and then we had to sort through. And again, we were doing cut and paste, but in the old-fashioned way, we were actually cutting out the pictures and sticking them together for the preparation for the book. Oh wow! I've got a big box somewhere full of this stuff,
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the technology's definitely made things. I suppose I came into this in around 2004 or 5 with Kendo World, so it was already digitized and on computers by then. But
yeah, it's the same. It's the same with the researchers, because, as I say, once the internet burst on the scene, I did some genealogical research on my family, and it was just so much easier to be able to I'd done the hard slog as well. I'd been to records offices and gone through everything, but to be able to do it at a touch of your fingers is quite amazing. Mm-hmm. And I find that now, as I say, with the research that we did for the other books, more recent books, it was a lot easier to find stuff. It's just knowing where to look. Right. No, but it seems to work.
Okay, so the first book that you did with us was A Truly British Samurai, The Exceptional Charles Boxer. Great. What a salesman there. You got a great copy for you there.
Yeah.
So what interested you in that character? Why did you decide to devote a lot of time to watching him?
Boxer got flagged up to me by Roald Knudsen. We were out with Roald Knudsen one day, and he mentioned this guy called Charles Boxer, who I'd never heard of. And he said, "Oh yeah, he did kendo a long time ago." And one of his students, a guy called Phillips, had met him and done an interview with him over about 3 bottles of scotch, and he came over as something quite interesting. There was nothing about him. Apart from when I went online on the internet, of course, everything burst out about him, about his life. He was an academic, not qualified, but he wrote several books on Portuguese history. He was an expert, and he was at the SOAS, and I think it was Harvard. He was a professor there. This was after his career, but originally he was a soldier, and he went to Japan in 1931. So I started to research, and I'd say all of that stuff was fairly well documented about his affair with Emily Hahn, his marriage, about him being in Hong Kong, that he was a spy. All of that's fairly well documented. But what wasn't documented was his kendo history. And I had done previously to that, I'd done Lidston with you in the magazine. And Lidston, again, was fairly easy because I was given an invite into the family and then found documentation within the family. And the same thing happened with Boxer. I contacted his daughter, Amanda Boxer, who Alex very, very nicely pointed out was very famous for in Saving Private Ryan. She's Private Ryan's mum.
Oh, that's right. When the telegrams come to the house to say that her three sons died. That's right.
She was around in the 60s and 70s. She was on a big series called The Pharaohs, and for that production, she shaved her head, which was really, really strange at that time for a woman to do that. But she was quite a stunner as well around that period. Anyway, we got in touch. And she was not very happy to start with. She had got some very, very bad publicity when her father died. Some people started to attack him, saying he had been a collaborator in the Second World War with the Japanese in Hong Kong. And of course, being dead, he was not there to defend himself. But several people did, and they had to retract all of the statements that were made because they were totally not founded. So we met, and we got on quite well. We went to see her in a few plays, myself and Kazuo. It was quite nice. And then we visited her at a house, and we were looking for photographs. And then we found these amazing photographs of him in Nara, 1931. And then she opened a box and pulled out, and there was his kimono and hakama, and she ended up saying, "Well, you keep them, look after them for me," you know. So we've still got his kimono and hakama. But it was amazing because then again she kind of unfolded the fact that he had in 1931 he had been given a housekeeper for not just housekeeping but lots of other stuff too, and he had lived basically as a Japanese man with the military because he was seconded to the infantry, I think it was, to as a language officer. And at that time, he also started to research Portuguese history quite seriously. And he wrote his first paper while he was in Japan on swords. I think you might have seen it. So that part became very interesting for me to find out about him. And then when we went to Nara, we had a little walk around the area where he lived. And of course, the Budokai has moved. That was gone from where it had been, where the pictures were taken in Nara. But overall, the whole process was really good, and putting it all together with the other stuff that was already out there, it gave it a nice feel. Unfortunately, he was shot in Hong Kong, injured, and became prisoner of war. Never practiced kendo again. But Steve Phillips said to me that in his greenhouse, he still had his kendo armor.
Oh wow!
Apparently, yeah, he still. And shinai and stuff, we don't know what happened to it. I mean, all we got, as I say, was the kimono and hakama. But and he did like it a lot. But he was more interested in the conversation that Steve Phillips had with him, was telling him about the exploits of throwing people through windows on the military's night out in Nara, or getting drunk or whatever. He's an interesting guy because he is. For me, the real kind of James Bond. He was a spy. He did do kendo to a reasonable level of the time, and especially for a Brit. So yeah, I enjoyed that very much. I think writing books has to be about enjoyment as well. It's probably the research, I think, that I really like.
Did he take any gradings or anything like that while he was in Japan?
Yes, he did. He was training with Sasaburo Takano's dojo, and he's in the book. We've got his shodan and his Nidan certificates. They're actually in the book.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, and we had this discussion with Nagao Sensei about the level of gradings in those days. His level would have been probably a lot higher than saying second dan now, because it only went up to fifth dan. So it was quite something, I think, for him to do that. And he was quite a resilient character. I mean, he was in a school of hard knocks, and they used to beat the crap out of him, basically. There's some interesting recollections, and it was what was really another thing that popped up was all of a sudden there was Kozo Takizawa Sensei in there, kind of looking after him and the other foreigners there training in the dojo, which is something that he then carried forward right up into the 60s, because he was looking after kind of the development of kendo in the UK and Europe. And
he's a well-known figure in UK kendo as well, isn't he, Takizawa Sensei?
Kozo Sensei, yeah. And also Ozawa Sensei's father as well was also here, and other places, America and Europe. Yeah, so yeah.
So after the war, Charles Boxer, he did no kendo at all after the war?
No, he was invalided out of the army, and as I say, he had no academic qualifications, but he was the expert on Portuguese history. So he ended up getting a job at King's College, firstly, as the what do they call it now? He was a professor in charge of Portuguese history. And that's all he did after that. He wrote, his writing was phenomenal. I think it's something like 300 works he actually published, and not only in English, but in Portuguese and Dutch as well. So he was prolific on that side, and everything was done on a typewriter. There was no internet then for him. So he's quite an amazing guy.
From something that you wrote in the book, I seem to remember, he seemed a very kind of stoic type of guy. He like you say, his arm was he lost the use of his arm after being a POW. Yeah. Never. Like, I remember one of the stories. I think it was his daughter discussing in the book, where often they would hear like crashes of teacups around the house and swearing, but he never complained or asked for help or anything.
No. I think that if we look at people in general, that you're born with your character, I think, and sometimes I get a bit cross when people say, people who do kendo, they're really honest and they're very straightforward people, and et cetera, but I think that you need to have the character before that. I think kendo can maybe help, but it certainly can't change you that dramatically, because there are lots of bad people who do kendo too, probably some still around. But his character, I think, being in solitary confinement for, was it 3 years, I think it was, in Hong Kong, he was quite well looked after when they first became a prisoner of war, because he was an expert on Japanese history and spoke Japanese fluently, and he knew more about their culture than they did probably, and they had to give him the respect. So he got fairly well treated to start with, but then he got involved in some kind of a conspiracy to make a radio and listen to broadcasts. So he was going to get beheaded at one stage, but they locked him up for 3 years. And I think that at that time, that must have actually done something to his character, to be able to survive that with injury. And only a copy of Marcus Aurelius for reading must have done something. It really must.
Right.
Yeah.
So after you had written the boxer book, you did. It started originally as a couple of articles in Kendo World about R.A. Lidstone. He was a fascinating character as well. With didn't he serve on a battleship in the Jutland War? Is that correct?
Yes,
in the First World War.
Yeah. He had been in the Naval Academy from a very early age, like 15 or something. So, yeah. He also, I mean, it's interesting because the 20th century seems to have thrown up lots of individuals with that are quite exceptional. You look at like Hemingway and people like that, and even Boxer's wife, Emily Hahn, as a writer, and Boxer himself, and then Lidstone is again kind of in that kind of setting, because he was in the Navy in the First World War. He became an established music hall artist with the strong arm dancing technique, adagio dancing technique with his wife. They went to Australia and New Zealand. They came back. He became a fighter ranger, and then in the Second World War, he was conscripted into the RAF, not to fly, but as in charge of the American air bases in the UK. So he's got quite a varied history. And it was kind of it was again Terry Holt that kind of pushed that one on me, because everyone was always talking about Lidstone and the Lidstone Taikai at the Nenriki, where they bring his armor out and stick it up, but nobody actually knew anything about him. It was, he died in the Nenriki in this year, and there are probably still a few people that do remember him. But the majority of people knew nothing. And even Terry, who had practiced at the Nenriki with Lidstone, didn't know where he first saw Kendo. He said, I think Lidstone is supposed to have seen Kendo in Australia, but it was actually in New Zealand that he first saw the Kendo. And then after going off to Australia and coming back, he started with the Kaoru Mishiku Sensei in London, 1931, which is exactly the same time as Boxer started in Japan. So the two started more or less at the same time, but in different. And there's always this kind of discussion goes on about, did they actually meet? And I was told that yes, they did meet. They met at the Budokwai, and. The two clubs where Kendo was taught in the UK in the very early days, the Budokwai starting, and the Anglo-Japanese Judo Society with Kaoru Mishiku Sensei. They were the guys doing the Kendo and teaching it.
Because at that time in the UK, it was there weren't really any dedicated kendo clubs. That was all part of judo clubs.
It was, yeah. I mean, it's before the term martial arts would have been used, but they were practicing at the Budo Kwai. They would do all kinds of stuff. I mean, they would do lectures on kiai. They would do lectures on Japanese art. They had displays in the building, which was at the back of the Buckingham Palace. They had a downstairs dojo there in the basement, and they would have exhibitions and stuff there. There was lots of stuff going on. Koizumi Sensei, who started the judo in the UK, taught kendo there. And again, that was another buzz I got, because I could never find any pictures of him wearing armor. And then about 2 years ago, all of a sudden a picture pops up with him wearing his bogu. So it was like, wow, there he is, you know. But yeah, those were the places that started the kendo, and it was being practiced alongside judo.
So then, Lidstone was training in that dojo after the war in the UK?
No, he up until the Second World War, he trained with Michiku Sensei, and as we know, in his book, there's a picture of the display given to Prince Chichibu in Hurlingham in Chelsea. The demonstration. I'll find it in a minute. There we go. I think, this is the picture of the Hurlingham display, and it was half Japanese, half Brits in there. Lidstone is listed, and so is Koizumi, and so is Mishiku, and some other Kujitani who I mentioned in Lidstone's book, Okamoto as well. They're all listed as doing this display for the prince, and they wore biscuits on their armor. Biscuits? And you were dead if the biscuits were broken. And it was so frenzied apparently that the referees had to drag people out to tell them they were beaten, basically. So that was really something. And he practiced with the Anglo-Japanese up until the Second World War, and then he stopped. And I think his practice was fairly intermittent anyway, because he was very busy working as a fighter ranger.
One of the fantastic photos from the book is him. I'm not sure if it was for Robin Hood, but he's teaching someone how to use a sword. Errol Flynn, I believe.
Yeah,
was that for Robin Hood, or was that for a different?
Richard Green, he taught, who was a Robin Hood on the TV back in the 60s. He taught Errol Flynn, of course, and also Robert Taylor was another big star of American movies. So yeah, he was teaching people to fence because he was a member of the Royal Academy of Fencers. He's associated with that period. We've got Egerton Castle, who was a very famous fencer of that period. He wanted to bring back dueling. It was must have been quite hairy because people. It's around the same time as a Batitsu was happening. So it was pretty rough in London, I guess, around that period. So people needed to defend themselves. So yeah.
So yeah, he was a very interesting character, Lidstone. There seems to be kind of a lot of you come across people of that around that time, many different skills and many different interests.
Yeah. I say it was fair. They were famous as the dancers, but the fame in those days didn't actually have money going with it. So they were always struggling for money. They when they went off to New Zealand, they struggled, and he ended up teaching fencing there, and in Australia too, having a fencing school, and she was teaching dancing. And it wasn't until they got some money left to them by an auntie who passed away that they were able to come back to the UK. And even when he was doing bit parts as well in movies himself, and teaching at the Old Vic. He taught stage people as well how to fence, and then he set up this organisation of fighter rangers and but he was always struggling for money. They were never well off. So, and it wasn't until 1957 when Knudsen discovered the three armas in the Anglo Japanese Judo Society, or the London Judo Club as it was called, and started to practice kendo, that he got in touch with Lidstone and kind of dragged him back into kendo. But he was a perfect gentleman, and he held the British Kendo Association together in the early years for sure. It was because people respected him as kind of the grandfather of kendo in the UK for sure.
So for people that don't know about him, what exactly is the Lidstone Taikai?
The Lidstone Taikai is a memorial competition for him, and it's for Q grades. And it happens every year at Den Enrique. Obviously not this year, but every year. It's been going on for not since he passed away, but from a short period after that. They started to have this competition called an Enrique Taikai.
But only for Q grades, not for
yeah. No downgrades in there, no.
Roughly how many people participate in that competition?
I don't know. I mean, when I did it back in 81 or 82, I think there must have been about, it must have been a good 30 people there, 30, 40 people can attend. It depends, on the numbers. But yeah.
Okay. So you said that your kendo history goes back to, I know you got your Shodan in 1982. So
yeah.
Since then, in your obviously a kendo career of around 40 years now, who has been some of the big influences on your kendo life since then?
Initially with Terry Holt Sensei was my first teacher, and then meeting Goro Otaki in Japan in 83 was a big influence on me. As I say, he didn't have any grade. He was until I found out later he had a Menkyu Kaidan, and he'd been taught by Nakayama Hiromichi. Nakayama Hakudo had taught him. And he was quite something to watch. A lot of pressure, real old-style kendo, but very interesting man because he had his business in Kawasaki. He was into commodities. And they also had hotels, I believe, the family. And his father had been sent to America for his education in the Meiji period. So it was quite something. He spoke English. He could read Greek. He could read Russian. And was a real kind of philosopher of life. He was he said, always a student. I'm not a teacher. I'm always a student. So we got on very well, and he was a big influence on my thinking, not so much on my kendo, because it was something different to what I was being taught. And then going to Kitamoto, I experienced Japanese kendo for the first time, perhaps because in UK I didn't see a Japanese teacher actually for about 3 years. There was not anybody around. But after Kitamoto, then we started to have a group in the Thames Valley area called the Thames Valley Kyokai. We had 6 dojos together, and we would practice. And there was a teacher from Nanzan University, Shoji Enomoto, was doing a sabbatical in UK on European budo. We were studying, and I helped him with that a little bit on the research about fencing and stuff. And he would come and support us in this group of 6 dojos. And then we went over, I was working in Paris in my business for about 25 years, 3 times a year. And I used to practice in the dojos in Paris. And I set up a visit to Maison Lafitte dojo outside of Paris with Jean-Claude Touvi. And we took a group of from the Thames Valley Kyokai for a weekend visit for practice and for socializing, etc. All on the train and the boat, no cars or anything. It was quite nice having to navigate through the metro of Paris, but I'd done that a few times anyway, so it was okay. And there on the Saturday morning in the Budo Ons, I saw from the corner of my eye this person walk into the dojo, and I looked and I thought, wow, that is a sensei, just by the way that he walked in. And he sat down and he put his armor on, and I was the first person to practice with him, and that was Sumi Sensei. And so that was the start of the relationship. He was there in Paris, in France, as a representative from the Zenken, the expert, as they call him in France, for about 6 months, with his family, his wife and two boys. And we met afterwards, and Terry and myself, and we discussed, and we invited him to come to London because what happened in the summer in France is everybody's on holiday, and they were kind of at a loose end what to do with their expert. So we said, okay, we'll take him for a long weekend, and he came over. And I'd started running the Kodokan seminar in about 2 years before, 86, with Matsumoto Junpei from Kyoto. He was 85 or 86. Kind of lost a year somewhere. And then Matsumoto Sensei came over 87 for the second year. And then in 88, Enomoto Sensei ran it for us because he was still in the UK. And then I asked Sumi Sensei, could you come and run the seminar? And he said, yeah, fine. So that was 89. And this year should have been the 33rd year of the seminar. So Sumi Sensei has been coming to the seminar for over 30 years. So it's had a little bit of an effect on me.
How important has Sumi Sensei been? Well, obviously not just to yourself, but to Kendo in Britain in the bigger picture.
I think that through the Kodokan seminar, many people have been exposed to his teaching, not just in UK, but in Europe as well. I mean, lots of people who come from Sweden and Switzerland and France, Belgium, come to the Kodokan seminar to be able to train with him. It's a kind of a unique environment because you can. The original idea I took from Kitamoto was that I wanted to have a seminar where you eat, sleep, and fall down and get drunk and get up and play kendo all together. And that's what we started with the Kodokan. It became the first residential seminar for that. So you could be sitting next to Sumi Sensei, talking to him one-to-one, which is probably quite unique because it doesn't always happen in Japan like that. I think we're very fortunate in the UK to have this kind of exposure with high-level teachers. Ozawa Sensei is another one that's been coming to the UK for more than 20 years. So, again, you can socialize and meet. And then Sumi Sensei started to bring some friends with him, Tashiro Sensei, Kumamoto Sensei, also from Kyushu. And then other senseis wanted to come as well. So we can end up with like 7 or 8 senseis on this seminar. Nagao Sensei also has been there, Wagaki Sensei, Mori Sensei, they've all come to the seminar. So it's kind of a great event for us to be having that exposure.
Right. So
yeah.
you mentioned a couple of times that you wanted to make your seminar kind of like the Kitamoto seminar, which I understand you've taken part in Kitamoto, is it 2 or 3 times? Twice. So,
yeah.
It's something that Gabriel spoke about when we talked to him last week about how back in the early days, Kitamoto was like a hell 2 weeks. But now I think it's 8 days now, I think.
Yeah.
So what were your experiences? Yeah. That was in the early 80s that you went to that. What was it like then?
It was the first one. There was, I don't know, about 60 people, I think, on the first one, 83. It was a kind of, heaven and hell. It was great. I mean, the hospitality was fantastic. I think we had at least 3 parties there that were official, never mind what was going on out in the bars and in the Kitamoto town. I mean, Gabriel, we had a great time. It was really quite something. And it was a camaraderie and it was fun. Sleeping in the dormitory, I remember there was some guys from Hong Kong, and one of them was a real snorer. And one of the Swiss guys said to him, he said, if you snore tonight, I'm going to cut your throat. And the guy didn't know whether to believe whether he was joking or what. Anyway, he did start to snore. So we picked him up in his futon and moved him out into the corridor. And it was kind of stuff like that was going on, you know. And that first year we had part of the, because it's everything, it's lectures and I don't know whether they still do it, but you have lectures and we had visits to museums and there was all kind of stuff going on in the original ones. And, well, I lost my place now. Yeah, there was all kinds of stuff happening. So Gabriel and I set up a good friendship at that time. I think there was a very nice picture because it was, I think Gabriel was living in Argentina at the time. And there's a picture of both of us blowing our nose on each other's flag. So it was, you can imagine the kind of stuff that was going on.
Oh dear, around in the early 80s, I guess that was a bit of a touchy time between our two nations, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah. But it was good. It was all good fun. It was nothing like that. I mean, you know, politics and all that stuff was, you were there to do kendo. And as I say, the parties were great. The practice was hard. The worst part about it was for me was that I was in a group where they took us in a little minibus down the road to a school because they didn't have the full facility there at that time. Some people stayed in the old dojo there, and some people had to go to the school. And next to the school was a swimming pool. So you can imagine in, when was it, July, August time, how hot it was. And we're doing kakari gecko in the dojo, and all the kids are splashing about in the pool. So it was like a mental torture. And then when you went to the toilet, you could look out of the window and you could see the rice fields blowing in the sunshine. And it was like, where would I rather be? But you had to go back and do the practice. So, you know, and you'd be standing there and there'd be a pool of water. There's no aircon in this dojo. It was
that's what a few people I've spoken to about the old days of the Kitamoto seminar. I think Gabriel mentioned it as well, is that when I think the last time he went was in 2008, 7, something like that, the new dojo that they use is actually air conditioned, which is even the new Noma dojo that I'm a member of as well is air conditioned, which is just fantastic.
Yeah. I can remember we had I don't know, it was 83 or 84. We had a lecture, a sword lecture. Somebody from Tokyo Museum, I think a British guy came down. Or was it? No, it was a Swedish guy came down to give a lecture on swords. And we were on the top floor, and the air conditioning had broken, and you couldn't switch it off. So we ended up opening the windows to try and to get some heat into the room. It was quite something.
So I imagine those type of hard trainings back in Kitamoto and them days have had would have been a formative experience.
Yeah, there was, lots of people collapsed. Lots of people collapsed during the training. But I think from what Terry told me, he was at the one in Katsura, and that was even worse.
Oh, really?
I believe so. He said something about a sand dune or hill outside of the dojo, and they had to run up it or something.
Was that the Nippon Budokan Kenshu Center?
I don't know. I just remember him saying that people were collapsing as well there. So,
I'm actually, obviously, as many people can probably tell from my perfect diction and great accent, that I'm also from England. But my kendo experience has all been through starting in Japan back in 2003. But one thing that happened quite a lot when I first started and got to know people here is, several times I was asked, do you know Paul Budden's book, Looking at a Far Mountain? But then also what people would ask me as well is, do you know Terry Holt? Do you know Terry Holt? And loads of different people. So it's someone that you've mentioned quite a few times so far this evening. So how important was he on your kendo journey?
Terry wasn't, I mean, he was my first teacher, but he was my very dear friend. And we worked together. He was an electrician, very technical guy. He fixed anything. He always had the engine out of his car, working with his son David on it, or anything to do with mechanics or electrical. Terry could fix it. He really could. So we worked together. He helped me on exhibitions. We worked in Germany, came to Germany with me a few times, and we did stuff in the UK. So it was more than just a kendo teacher. And it was a kind of a love-hate relationship. We would have the most blinding arguments, but in 5 minutes it would be forgotten. You know, that was a real friendship. There was no animosity between us. Nothing was ever carried forward that, you know, if we did have an argument. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
I mean, he's a well-known character here in Japan, and I think when Mumeshi Dojo had its 40th anniversary, there was a big delegation came over to Japan. So obviously, he's from. I only met him twice when 2 times when I've been back to England. I took my bogu and was able to train at Mumeshi because it's right by Heathrow Airport. So it was. I'd land stay in some hotel nearby, and then the next day I would go there. So his most of his experience was from learning kendo in the UK, right? Not so much in Japan in his
Terry. No, he started, I think, at the Nenriki. The Nenriki was a dojo that Knudsen started. They used to practice in Stockwell, I think it was, which is still there. The dojo, not the same place. There's still a Reme dojo. There's still a split between the Reme and the BKA, basically. So not so many of the Reme dojos left, but there's one in Stockwell, I think it is, or Vauxhall. And Knudsen then started the Nenriki, and then shortly after moved down to Brighton. So the Nenriki was kind of the London hub. And when Terry started, I think Liston might have still been there. I believe he was still practicing at the Nenriki. And Knudsen used to go up there occasionally from Brighton. And then, of course, all the other people started training there. John Howell and I think Jock Hobson had started at the London Judo Society with Knudsen and Lidston, and then he was practicing also at the Nenriki. So a lot of people came from the Nenriki. And then there was a guy called Brent Casaniga from Australia, who you may know. Some people will probably know him. He was a Mumeshi member. He moved out to Australia from there, but he was running. It wasn't called a Mumeshi. I think it was called the West London Dojo or something. He was running Heston Dojo, they called it. And he asked Terry to go and help him. So Terry went there. And then Fuji Sensei was also around in that period. He was practicing at the Nenriki as well, and throughout other places. And he apparently named the dojo the Mumeshi Dojo. So it was in Heston before it moved to Cranford, which is where it still is now.
Mm-hmm. So
Terry's UK. UK started UK everything basically, and he was very, very pan-British. He could be quite a handful if you were going in France or in Germany at that time in those early days. He was very proud to be British.
What made him such a good teacher then? Because I hear many great stories about him, and
he just had a lot of time for people. He had a very big heart. He would give you time. He gave me an awful lot of time when I started. I was still practicing Aikido at that time, and I had a dojo in Amersham, and I started to do Kendo. I went to Mumeshi and I started, and Terry said to me, "Why don't you start Kendo in Amersham at your Aikido dojo?" I said, "Okay." So I said, "You're going to come?" He said, "Yeah." And he would come every week. He would come out to Amersham and we would practice. And then we had guys coming in from Oxford to the practice in Amersham, and then they started the Oxford dojo. But it was kind of he wanted to promote Kendo big time. He enjoyed people's company, and he enjoyed the practice. He did enjoy having a bash, for sure.
What's the name of the pub that's just down the road from the sports centre? I remember I've only been to Mumeshi twice, but I've only been to that pub twice as well. So,
yeah.
I know the Rising Star is the one in Nenriki.
Not the Rising. No, I don't remember what it was, because originally there was a pub in the Mumeshi. They had a bar in the sports centre there for many, many years. We always went in the bar afterwards there. So it was when the bar closed down that they moved to that pub. But I can't. And it's a Fuller's pub. But I can't remember what the name is of it. But yeah, that's their centre now, I think. So yeah.
And of course,
but it's kind of funny as well, because I don't know whether I can tell you this story or not. You can edit it out later, maybe, if you want to. But Terry knew everybody. Terry, every Japanese teacher that you mentioned, Terry knew him. Okay, that was irrespective of who they were. Terry knew them. Oh, I know him. He was a friend of mine, and they're all friends of his. Terry's friends. And the big joke was that one of the students said, and not to Terry, but he said, he probably gets a Christmas card from Kasahara Sensei still. So it was kind of like, okay. But that was Terry. He did know a lot of people for sure, so yeah.
So after the UK, you've been running dojo in Malta, is that correct?
I helped to start the Kendo in Malta. I helped the development of Kendo there, yeah. But
now you lived in Malta for a while? Or
No, I didn't actually live there. I was going there quite a lot, and we kind of, as I say, I helped start the Kendo there, and Kaja also was a national coach for the team there for some years. So I was a technical director for most of the years, and then president for a couple of years there. But now it's finished. I'm kind of getting a bit too old for travel now, so I'm not that I don't do it, but I'm still kind of. And they need to go in a different direction now, so it's a parting of the waves. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're just coming up.
Not those kind of waves. Those kind of waves. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just coming up on about an hour now. So I think it's a fascinating chat so far. Before we finish up, I don't know if anyone else has any questions they want to put in the chat, but if not, would you like this opportunity to just quickly promote your books that you've got?
I can do, yeah. What I wanted to say was about research. I think researching is extremely important, and not just historical research, but to research any aspect that you need, because I think that without the research, you can't progress. I honestly think that no matter how much physical energy you exert in Kendo, if you're very serious about it, which all of us seem to be, having practiced for a number of years, and also the duration of time doesn't help either. I think that you need to research, and sometimes that means thinking outside of the box to look for different solutions to any problems that you've got. So I think it's essential to research. And again, looking at history, we can see where things went wrong. Whether that altered anything, I don't know. But it's still interesting to see the outcome of what happened. And is it going to happen again, or will it be changed, or, So, yeah. But, yeah, books. I've got, what have we got? That one, Man of Many Parts.
So Man of Many Parts is about Lidstone, Roald Alexander Lidstone.
Boxer, Charles Boxer. Latest one, Paper Butterflies. That kind of did get me started in a way, because part of the Kodokan Seminar was also lectures. We had lectures, sports lectures and other lectures. And I did a lecture on the Japanese village, 1885 in London, and that kind of got me started on researching the history in the UK. So I went on to that, and then Hugh Cortazzi's book. They've got a section in there on the history of UK Kendo. There's 10 volumes he did. Hugh Cortazzi, amazing writer, and then of course Oshu Kendo Reme, forerunner of the European Kendo Federation. That one, if you get a copy, it's worth £1,000.
Yeah,
It's also
if anyone's got any spare copies of Looking at a Far Mountain and study Kendo Kata, then I'm sure your quid's in.
There's also a paperback. Tuttle reissued it in a paperback. Now it's only available as a Kindle, I think, so you can't actually get that one. Devil's Gloves, okay, that's work in progress still, but it's got some novelty interests. The other books, of course, is Lidston's, if you can find that. That's also worth some money. The first book in English on Kendo by R.A. Lidston. However, this one, there was a guy called Tomio Otani also teaching Kendo at the same time as Knudsen. And he wrote a Kendo section in here, and it's really good. It's far better than, dare I say it, Lidston's book. His understanding, because his father was a judo teacher. It's a section on Kendo there. He worked with Koizumi Sensei. Otani Sensei is kind of very important for the introduction of children's judo in the UK. And also he wanted that judo, in a way, is to blame for the very poor money that we get for charging for Kendo in the UK, because he wanted to bring judo down to an affordable price. So you could practice for like 10p or something, you know. So he's to blame for everything. But great book, Tommy Otani's book. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
We've had several people listening into this conversation, so thanks very much to our patrons for doing that.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. It's
No problem.
for us in Japan, it's about our bedtime now. I think Alex needs to go to bed and catch up on his beauty sleep, which
All right.
was obviously going to need to be quite
You mean
a lot.
Alex today hasn't collapsed then from too much beer?
I know, mate. No, I've been entranced by the stuff you've been talking about. It's been really great. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
There's actually so much more that I wanted to throw your way. I think we're going to have to do another one, don't you, Michael?
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really wanted to know more about Terry Holt as a person.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to know a little bit more graphic detail of your time in Kitamoto. And also, you know, what are the things that are primarily inhibiting the dissemination of something like Kendo culture in your cultural milieu of the UK and elsewhere, and you know what works, what doesn't work. You've spent decades teaching it. You've seen a high turnover of students. What is it that keeps students there, and what why do they leave, and you know, how can you make a success of it in a place like the UK or Malta? So many other things that we've only just scratched the surface. So if you're up for it, I would really like to talk to you about the nitty gritty, as it were, if that's all right.
Yeah. Name the names.
Yeah. We want some dirt on people, man.
You want yeah, sure. There are a lot of stories that 40 years is a long time, so it seems, and there have been some notable stories and events that have happened that kind of stick with you, you know. So yeah. Anytime.
All righty. Well, that's a done deal then. You can't escape us now.
Could I ever?
Yeah. What about other people online, like Brian? I can see Brian's ugly mug there, and Gabrielle, and there's a Hevorik-san from France. Have you guys got any questions you'd like to ask, or before we sign off for the first episode of Paul Budden on KED Talks?
Oh wow.
We've had no questions come through at the moment, but
okay, all right.
Typing away.
Yeah. All righty. Well, I'll tell you what. Thanks again, Paul. Michael, maybe if you can talk with Paul and schedule another time in the next month or something like that. You know.
Yeah, definitely, we can do that. And I want to hear the dirt about Kitamoto, and what the other side of Kitamoto.
I'll probably never ever be able to come back to Japan if I tell you all this
I think we better schedule another 3 sessions.
I think Gabriel's looking very excited already about hearing about Kitamoto, so I'm sure he'll have something to say about that as well.
Yeah, too right. Alrighty, okay. Well, I'll let you finish things off, Mike, and thank you very much, Paul.
All right, everyone.
Yeah,
well,
have a good one.
Paul, thank you very much for joining us for this KED Talks, and thanks to all our patrons for joining in. As obviously we've just arranged with Paul, there will be some more talks coming up in the next month or so. So thanks very much. Keep safe.
Pleasure.
And speak to you soon.
All right. Have a good one. Okay, don't forget the gravy.
Yeah. Merry Christmas and all that bar humbug shit.
Don't think to that.
Too right.